My mother sent me a cold message. You're banned forever. I stood at the locked door in shock. 1 week later, her financial advisor called in a panic. Don't you dare show your face around here again expecting anything from us. My mother's voice sliced through the phone like a razor blade. I stood frozen in the parking lot of my apartment complex in Austin, Texas, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles had turned bone white. The late October heat still clung to the evening air, but I felt ice cold inside. Mom, I genuinely don't understand what I did wrong, I said, my voice trembling. Can we please just talk about this? Talk? Her laugh was bitter. There's nothing to discuss, Violet. You made your choice when you decided to humiliate our family with your little rebellion. We've decided you're no longer part of this family. Stay away. Permanently. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone screen in complete disbelief. Just 4 days ago, I had been at my sister Cassidy's engagement celebration, marking what should have been a happy family occasion. Instead, it had devolved into a nightmare when I refused to lie about my income to impress Cassidy's future in-laws. My mother had been absolutely furious that I wouldn't pretend to be financially struggling to make Cassidy look more accomplished by comparison. My name is Violet Chen, and I'm 27 years old. For the past 5 years, I've worked as a senior account manager at TechCore Industries, a rapidly growing technology company that specializes in advanced manufacturing systems. While my family assumed I was barely making ends meet in my little tech job, the reality was dramatically different. My annual salary of $92,000, combined with quarterly performance bonuses, had allowed me to build a comfortable life and impressive savings account. The irony wasn't lost on me. My mother, Patricia, had always been consumed with appearances and social standing. She lived in the same sprawling ranch house in the affluent suburb where I grew up, maintaining the illusion of prosperity that had defined our family for decades. What she didn't realize was that her disappointing daughter had become more financially successful than anyone else in the family. I walked back to my apartment in a daze, my mind spinning from the conversation. The familiar burden of family disappointment settled on my shoulders, but something felt different this time. There was a finality to my mother's words that made my stomach twist into knots. As I unlocked my door, I noticed my hands were shaking, not from the heat, but from a growing awareness that this confrontation was merely the beginning of something far more significant. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Family financial matters require immediate attention. Contact Lawrence Mitchell, Sterling Financial Group. I stared at the message, utterly confused. Why would a financial advisor be contacting me about family matters when I had just been permanently exiled? Something was profoundly wrong, and I had the disturbing feeling that the worst was still ahead. Growing up in the Chen household meant living under constant pressure to maintain perfect appearances. My mother, Patricia, had constructed her entire identity around our family's perceived status in Austin's social circles. She served on non-profit boards, hosted extravagant dinner parties, and ensured our house always looked like something from Architectural Digest. My sister Cassidy, 3 years older than me, had always been the perfect daughter. She married her college sweetheart immediately after graduation, and settled into a comfortable life of part-time consulting work and social commitments. Cassidy understood the game perfectly. She knew exactly what to say and how to present herself to earn our mother's constant approval. I, on the other hand, had always been the family's disappointment. After college, I chose to focus on building my career rather than rushing into marriage. I worked 60-hour weeks, tackled challenging projects, and steadily climbed the corporate ladder at TechCore Industries. But to my family, success was measured by social connections and traditional milestones, not professional achievements. The trouble started 5 years ago when I began working in manufacturing technology. My mother had been horrified that her daughter would take a job in factory work, as she dismissively called it. She couldn't grasp that modern manufacturing involved sophisticated artificial intelligence and robotics, or that my role managing client relationships for automated production systems was both intellectually demanding and exceptionally well compensated. "Why can't you find something more appropriate?" she would ask during family dinners. "Something professional, like working for a consulting firm or a marketing agency." I tried explaining that I did work professionally, that I spent my days managing multi-million-dollar contracts and coordinating with engineering teams across 3 continents, but Patricia had already formed her opinion. Nothing I said could change it. In her mind, I was the daughter who had settled for less. The financial gap between my reality and my family's perception had widened each year. While they assumed I was struggling, I had been quietly building wealth. My investment portfolio had grown substantially, and I owned my 2-bedroom apartment outright, something even Cassidy couldn't claim about her house. But I had kept this information private, partly for my own peace of mind and partly because I knew it would complicate family dynamics. Patricia needed someone to feel superior to, and I had unknowingly filled that role. Revealing my success would have disrupted the carefully constructed narrative she had built around our family. The engagement celebration 4 days earlier had been the breaking point. When Cassidy's future in-laws asked about my work, I had answered honestly about my role at TechCore Industries. I mentioned the challenging projects we were implementing and the international clients I managed. Patricia's expression had darkened with each word. Later that evening, she pulled me aside and demanded that I downplay my success at future family events. "It makes Cassidy look inadequate when you go on about your little job," she hissed. "Can't you just say you're doing fine and leave it at that?" I had refused, and apparently that refusal had been the final straw. 2 days after my mother's devastating phone call, I drove past my childhood home out of pure habit. What I discovered made my heart plummet even further. The locks had been changed. New chrome deadbolts gleamed on the front door, and when I tested my key, it no longer worked. Patricia had literally locked me out of the family home where I had spent the first 18 years of my life. I sat in my Honda Accord in the driveway, staring at the house that no longer welcomed me. The autumn chrysanthemums Patricia meticulously maintained were still blooming brilliantly, and the perfectly manicured lawn looked as pristine as ever. Everything appeared normal from the outside, but I was no longer part of this picture. A neighbor walking his golden retriever waved at me hesitantly, clearly puzzled by my presence. Mr. Crawford had known me since I was a child, but I could see the uncertainty in his expression. Had Patricia told the neighbors I was no longer welcome? The thought made my face burn with humiliation. I drove home feeling hollow and displaced. That evening, I tried calling Cassidy, hoping she might help me understand what had triggered such an extreme reaction from our mother. The call went straight to voicemail. "Cassidy, it's Violet. I know you're probably swamped with wedding planning, but I really need to talk to you. Mom has completely cut me off and I don't understand what I did that was so terrible. Please call me back." But days passed without any response. It became crystal clear that Cassidy had chosen sides, and it wasn't mine. Work became my sanctuary during this difficult period. My colleagues at TechCore Industries noticed my distraction, but I threw myself into my projects with renewed intensity. Managing the implementation of automated quality control systems for our aerospace clients required constant focus, and the demanding schedule helped keep my mind off the family drama. My boss, Senior Director Nathaniel Price, called me into his office on Thursday afternoon. "Violet, I wanted to discuss the Martinez Aviation contract. Your work on this project has been outstanding, and the client specifically requested you for their expansion phase next quarter." The Martinez contract was worth $3.2 million, representing the largest deal I had ever managed independently. Under normal circumstances, this would have been cause for major celebration. Instead, I felt the bitter irony of achieving professional success while losing my family. "Thank you, Nathaniel. I really appreciate the confidence you're showing in me," I replied, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. "Are you doing okay? You seem preoccupied lately," he observed, his tone gentle but concerned. "Just handling some personal issues. Nothing that will impact my work," I assured him. As I left his office, I realized my professional life was flourishing while my personal life crumbled. The contrast felt surreal and painful. I had everything I had worked for: financial security, career advancement, professional respect. But I had lost the family connections I had always assumed would be permanent. That evening, my phone rang with a call that would change absolutely everything. The call came at 7:15 on a Friday evening, while I was heating up leftover Chinese takeout and trying to distract myself with a documentary about ocean conservation. The number was local but unfamiliar, and I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer at the last second. "Miss Chen, this is Lawrence Mitchell from Sterling Financial Group. I need to speak with you urgently about your family's financial situation." I set down my fork, my appetite suddenly vanishing. "I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong person. I'm not involved in my family's finances." Actually, you are more involved than you realize, Lawrence said, his voice strained with an emotion I couldn't identify. According to the documents I have here, you're listed as the primary beneficiary and emergency contact for both your mother's and sister's investment accounts. I've been trying to reach Patricia Chen for 3 weeks without success, and the situation has become critical. My head spun. That's impossible. My mother just told me I'm no longer welcome in the family. Why would I be listed on her accounts? The paperwork was filed 18 months ago, Lawrence explained. Miss Chen, I really need to meet with you in person. There are some very serious issues we need to discuss, and I can't go into specifics over the phone. Would you be available tomorrow morning? I agreed to meet him at his office at 10 o'clock, my mind racing with questions. After hanging up, I paced my apartment, trying to make sense of this development. Why would Patricia list me as her beneficiary and emergency contact, while simultaneously cutting me out of her life? The contradiction made absolutely no sense. Saturday morning arrived overcast and humid, matching my mood perfectly. Sterling Financial Group occupied a modern office building in downtown Austin, and Lawrence Mitchell turned out to be a soft-spoken man in his 50s with a kind of gentle demeanor that probably helped clients discuss difficult financial realities. Thank you for coming, Miss Chen. Please have a seat, he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. I'm afraid what I have to tell you is quite serious. He opened a thick folder and spread several documents across his desk. Your mother and sister have been making some very poor financial decisions over the past 2 years. They've liquidated most of their retirement accounts, taken out significant loans against your mother's house, and invested heavily in what appears to be a fraudulent investment scheme. My stomach dropped. How much are we talking about? Combined, they've lost approximately $450,000, Lawrence said quietly. The house your mother lives in is now mortgaged to its full value, and they owe substantial amounts to several creditors. Patricia has been avoiding my calls because she knows the situation is dire. I stared at the paperwork, trying to process the numbers. $450,000. The house that had been in our family for 28 years was essentially gone. There's more, Lawrence continued. The investment firm they put their money into was shut down by federal authorities last month. The principals have been arrested for running a Ponzi scheme. Your mother and sister are among hundreds of victims, but because they borrowed against the house to increase their investment, their losses are particularly severe. Why are you telling me this? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Because as their listed emergency contact and beneficiary, you have the legal authority to make decisions on their behalf if they become incapacitated or refuse to address the situation themselves. And Miss Chen, he paused, looking uncomfortable, based on their current trajectory, they're going to lose everything within the next 60 days unless someone intervenes. The irony hit me like a physical blow. My mother had banished me from the family for being an embarrassment, but I was apparently her only hope for financial salvation. I left Lawrence's office in a daze, clutching copies of financial documents that painted a devastating picture of my family's situation. The drive home gave me time to process the magnitude of what I had learned, and by the time I reached my apartment, shock had given way to a mixture of anger and disbelief. Patricia and Cassidy had fallen victim to a company called Pinnacle Growth Advisors, which had promised returns of 28% annually on commercial real estate development projects. The scheme had been sophisticated, complete with glossy brochures, fabricated testimonials, and a professional-looking office in downtown Austin. What made it particularly cruel was that the scammers had specifically targeted older adults and their adult children, exploiting fears about retirement security. I spread the documents across my dining table and began calculating the extent of the damage. The house, which had been worth approximately $650,000 when my father passed away 9 years ago, now carried mortgages totaling $590,000. Patricia's retirement accounts, which should have contained at least $320,000, had been completely drained. Even Cassidy's modest 401k had been cashed out to fund additional investments. The monthly obligations were staggering. Between mortgage payments, insurance, utilities, and minimum payments on various credit cards and loans, Patricia needed at least $5,000 each month just to maintain the status quo. But according to Lawrence's notes, her only income was Social Security and a small pension from my father's company, totaling perhaps $3,000 monthly. I called Lawrence back that evening. How long can this continue before they lose the house? Based on their current payment history, I'd estimate they have maybe 6 weeks before the bank initiates foreclosure proceedings, he replied. The credit card companies are already calling daily, and I've heard from 4 different collection agencies this week. Have you been able to reach my mother? She's been avoiding all contact with financial institutions. I think she knows how bad things are and doesn't want to face reality. After ending the call, I sat in my kitchen staring at my laptop screen. A quick online search revealed that Patricia had been tagged in several Facebook photos from charity events and social gatherings as recently as last week. She was still maintaining her public image, while privately facing financial ruin. The next morning, I drove to her house again. This time, I didn't try to use my old key. Instead, I rang the doorbell and waited. After several minutes, Cassidy answered, looking exhausted and avoiding eye contact. "Violet, you shouldn't be here," Mom said. "I know what Mom said," I interrupted, "but we need to talk about Lawrence Mitchell and Pinnacle Growth Advisors." Cassidy's face went white. "How do you know about that?" "Because I'm apparently your emergency contact and beneficiary, which is something you both forgot to mention when you decided to cut me out of the family." I pushed past her into the foyer, noting that several expensive pieces of furniture were missing. The antique grandfather clock that had belonged to my grandmother was gone, along with the oriental rug that had anchored the living room for as long as I could remember. "Where's Mom?" I asked. She's not feeling well," Cassidy said weakly. "Violet, we didn't know who else to turn to. The investment advisor seemed so legitimate, and they said we could triple our money in 2 years. We thought we were being smart, planning for the future." "By mortgaging the house? By cashing out your retirement accounts?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. Cassidy began crying. "We thought Mom would never have to worry about money again, and I wanted to help pay for my wedding without asking Justin's parents for money. It seemed like the perfect solution." The perfect solution had become a perfect disaster. Patricia finally emerged from her bedroom 20 minutes later, moving like a woman who had aged a decade in the past month. When she saw me standing in her living room, her expression cycled through surprise, anger, and something that looked almost like relief. "I told you not to come here," she said, but there was no force behind the words. "Lawrence Mitchell told me everything," I replied. $450,000. Mom. The house, your retirement, Cassidy's 401k, all of it gone." Patricia sank into her remaining armchair, suddenly looking every one of her 69 years. How was I supposed to know they were criminals? They had references, a beautiful office, testimonials from other clients. Margaret Reynolds from the book club invested with them and said they were wonderful. "Margaret Reynolds lost everything too," I said, having done my research. "The whole thing was a Ponzi scheme. They used new investors' money to pay fake returns to earlier investors. And when they couldn't recruit enough new victims, the whole thing collapsed." "But the man seemed so knowledgeable," Cassidy protested. "He explained everything about commercial real estate development and showed us projected returns based on historical data." "Historical data they fabricated," I said flatly. "None of those projects ever existed." I pulled out my phone and showed them a news article about the arrests. The principal organizers are facing federal charges for wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. They operated the scheme for 3 years and stole approximately $67 million from investors across Texas. They're looking at 20 years in prison. Patricia stared at the article, her hands shaking slightly. "We are going to lose the house, aren't we?" "Unless something changes dramatically, yes. You owe more than it's worth, and you don't have the income to make the payments." "What about bankruptcy?" Cassidy asked desperately. "Could we declare bankruptcy and start over?" "You could," I admitted, "but that would still mean losing the house, and it would destroy your credit for years. Plus, bankruptcy doesn't make problems disappear. It just reorganizes them." The 3 of us sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of the situation settling over us like a heavy blanket. I looked around the living room where I had spent countless hours as a child, trying to imagine strangers living here after the foreclosure. "There is another option," I said finally, "but it would require some significant changes." Both women looked at me expectantly. "I could help," I continued carefully. I have the financial resources to stop the foreclosure and manage the debt situation, but it would mean acknowledging some things about my life that you've both chosen to ignore. Patricia's expression hardened slightly. What do you mean? I mean that your disappointing daughter who works in factory work has been quite successful. I make more money than both of you combined. I own my apartment outright, and I have substantial savings and investments. Cassidy gaped at me. How much do you make? Enough to help, I said, avoiding specifics. But first, I need to understand something. Why did you list me as your beneficiary and emergency contact if you think so little of me and my choices? Patricia looked away, embarrassed. Your father insisted on it when we updated our wills. He said you were the most responsible person in the family, and that if anything happened to us, you'd be the one who could handle things properly. Dad was right, I said quietly. But after what happened at Cassidy's engagement party, I'm not sure I want to handle anything for people who treat me like a family embarrassment. The ball was now in their court. I let the silence stretch between us, watching my mother and sister absorb the full implications of their situation. Patricia's carefully maintained composure was cracking, and Cassidy looked like she might be sick. So what happens now? Patricia asked finally, her voice smaller than I had ever heard it. Now you decide how badly you want to keep this house and avoid bankruptcy, I replied. Because I'm not writing any checks until we establish some new ground rules for how this family operates. I pulled out a notebook and pen, setting them on the coffee table with deliberate precision. First, we are going to have an honest conversation about money. All of it. No more lies, no more pretending, no more maintaining appearances at the expense of reality. Patricia flinched. Violet, you don't understand the pressure. I understand plenty, I cut her off. I understand that you were so concerned with looking successful, that you risked everything on a get-rich-quick scheme. I understand that you were so busy judging my career choices that you failed to notice I was building actual wealth while you were destroying yours. Cassidy shifted uncomfortably. We never meant for things to get this bad. Intent doesn't matter when you're facing foreclosure, I said bluntly. What matters is making smart decisions going forward. And the first smart decision is acknowledging that I'm not the family failure you both thought I was. I opened my notebook and began writing. Here's what I'm willing to do. I'll pay off the immediate debts to stop the foreclosure proceedings. I'll consolidate your remaining obligations into a manageable payment plan, and I'll help you both develop realistic budgets that don't depend on magic investment returns. Patricia and Cassidy exchanged glances, hope beginning to creep into their expressions. But, I continued, in exchange, this family is going to operate very differently from now on. No more dismissing my career, no more treating me like an embarrassment, and absolutely no more financial decisions made without consulting me first. What kind of decisions? Cassidy asked nervously. All of them. Every expenditure over $500 gets approved by me. Every investment opportunity gets reviewed by me and Lawrence Mitchell, and both of you are going to take financial literacy classes so this never happens again. Patricia looked stricken. You're asking us to give up our independence. No, I replied firmly. I'm asking you to give up your delusions. The transformation that followed was both satisfying and sobering. Within 48 hours of our family meeting, I had arranged to pay off the most pressing debts and halt the foreclosure proceedings. The relief on Patricia and Cassidy's faces was palpable, but I made sure they understood this was not a return to business as usual. I established myself as the primary contact for all financial institutions and creditors, a role that gave me complete visibility into every aspect of their spending. The first monthly budget review revealed exactly how disconnected from reality they had become. $350 for a single dinner at the Capitol Grill. I asked, reviewing Cassidy's credit card statement. While you're supposedly struggling to pay your mortgage. It was Justin's birthday, Cassidy protested weakly. We wanted to celebrate somewhere special. You can celebrate at Chili's until your financial situation improves, I replied without sympathy. Special occasions don't justify financial irresponsibility. Patricia's spending was even more egregious. Hair appointments, designer clothing, charitable donations to maintain her social status, hundreds of dollars flowing out each month while she claimed poverty. The book club expects certain standards, she argued when I questioned a $250 donation to their charity auction. The book club can expect you to contribute your time instead of money you don't have, I countered. Your social standing isn't worth losing your home. I restructured their entire financial lives with the efficiency I brought to my work at TechCore Industries. Automatic payments, restricted credit limits, and weekly check-ins became the new normal. Both women chafed at the oversight, but they had forfeited the right to financial independence when they lost $450,000 to a scam. The most satisfying moment came when I informed them they would both need to find employment to contribute to household expenses. Patricia hadn't worked outside the home in 32 years, and Cassidy had never held a full-time job. But what will people think? Patricia asked, horrified. They'll think you're responsible adults who take care of their obligations, I replied. Novel concept, I know. 6 months after the crisis began, we achieved a major milestone. The house was no longer in immediate danger of foreclosure, and all credit card balances had been reduced to manageable levels. More importantly, both Patricia and Cassidy had developed a grudging respect for the financial discipline that had saved them from ruin. During our final family meeting of the year, Patricia surprised me by acknowledging something she had never admitted before. Violet, I owe you an apology, she said, her voice formal but sincere. I was wrong about your career, wrong about your capabilities, and wrong to treat you as a disappointment. You saved our family when we were too proud and foolish to save ourselves. The apology felt good, but it couldn't erase years of dismissal and condescension. I appreciate that, Mom, but this isn't about proving I was right or you were wrong. It's about building a family relationship based on honesty and mutual respect going forward. As the calendar turned and the first anniversary of the crisis approached, I reflected on how completely the family dynamics had shifted. The daughter who had once been locked out of her childhood home now held the keys to her family's financial future. The embarrassment who wasn't welcome at family gatherings had become the person they depended on for survival. Looking back on that tumultuous year, I realized that while I had gained control and extracted a form of justice from the situation, the victory felt more complex than I had expected. Though I couldn't deny the satisfaction of watching those who had dismissed me learn to respect the very skills they had once scorned.